Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and the Jaguars have made a plethora of moves in the last hour. I got home from work. I was really tired. I took a nap. I woke up and I see, Christian Kirk traded to the Texans. Well, holy crap. We got to talk about that. I see Devin Duvernay released as I'm setting up my computer. Okay, got to talk about that. And then, Evan Engram cut from the team. So we got a lot to talk about. So I thought this would be kind of a quick video. We already talked about Christian Kirk, obviously, and I kind of wanted to talk some fans off the ledge if anyone was like really upset about this, and just give some reason to this. But we got more to discuss than that, and so we're going to have a big conversation here, 3 different segments really. But we're going to start with Christian Kirk. This is the first news here. We obviously recorded the video yesterday, talking about him being released from the team. Why did that happen? And it was sort of an obvious decision, right? They asked him to take a pay cut. I don't know how big that pay cut was. I think it was over half his salary, I would guess. And it made sense to ask because he's had 2 season-ending injuries in a row. I think he's missed like 14 games. And at this age, even though he could have some good play left in him, you can't reasonably pay him at the ceiling of his value. I don't think that's a good way to operate a business. And so ultimately, they were in a position that when Christian Kirk declined taking a pay cut, they were going to have to move him. And so that was going to seemingly come in the form of a release. It didn't seem like they were even trying to shop him. And now we see the Texans have offered a trade to the Jaguars. Now, what for? I believe it is a 2026 7th, and we'll actually just confirm this here. Make sure we got this right. See all the cuts there. Yes, 2026 7th round pick from the Houston Texans. Now, we'll get into the whole conversation around this. People are upset because they're like, well, we just sent a guy we love to a division rival, and now we're going to have to watch him ball out there. First of all, I don't know how he performs. You know, he may have a good season there. He may also get hurt again because there is a trend there. Who really knows at this point? But what I will say is that if you go through really the history of the last 4 off seasons, maybe even further than that, the Houston Texans have a long storied history of acquiring players from the Jaguars really regardless of the situation. And what I mean by that is that they'll go pay a guy that had no value on this team or completely busted on a contract, what really don't deserve sometimes to be on that team. It's not always like egregious, but they go out of their way to acquire players from here. This has been a long history of this now. We've seen it last year with Foley Fatukasi, for example. You just consistently see it from them. Dario Ogunbowale just got extended, I think, yesterday or Tuesday. So this is something the Texans do. And I'm just going to be straight with you guys. There was about a 99.9, actually, let's call it a 100% chance that he was heading to Houston in free agency. It's one of the things I was the most sure about. Didn't say it. Didn't really think about saying it, honestly. But there's a long history of this. And so, basically, let's call this the import tariff for the Houston Texans. If you want to acquire our players all the time, just pay us something. And given that he had 1 more year on his deal, Jacksonville was not eligible for a comp pick here. So I think the idea of it is, hey, we were going to get nothing. We knew he was going to go to Houston. If we're being honest with ourselves, let's get a pick out of this just for the sake of it. And the other side of it, I don't know this for sure, so just please keep that in mind. But if they have not renegotiated the contract with him prior to getting this trade done, Houston might have some difficulty with that. Because I could see Christian Kirk maybe having got a little bit less on the market than what he would have got going to that team, because he may have needed to hit free agency to be told, hey, your value is not at $16.5 million, right? You've had injuries. You haven't been on the field enough. We got to pay you less. And maybe he goes into Houston and struggles to negotiate a deal. I would like to think, if you are a Houston Texans fan, that they have worked that out. I would guess they have, but there is the chance of that. So ultimately, my point here is, yeah, it's not fun to watch your teams go to a division rival. We've seen a lot of it here in recent years. We saw Calvin Ridley last year go to the Titans, right? And that freaked out a lot of people. But, good things did come out of that, to be fair. I don't know what'll come of this. I don't know what moves Jacksonville will make. We've heard there's some interest in Cooper Kupp, perhaps. So maybe that's something they do. But ultimately, this was probably going to happen. I say 100% a little jokingly, but I really kind of feel that way. And Jacksonville gets a pick out of it. So I understand if people are frustrated training with the division rival. Not going to fight you on that. But this was something that was probably going to happen. So let's wrap up the Christian Kirk contract there, because we discussed this the other day as well. Now, quick little segment here on Devin Duvernay. He has been released as well. We will actually, for the sake of looking at it, take a look at what he was slated to earn this year and break that down. Should have had this pulled up before, but it's been a little crazy. Evan Ingram got released 1 minute before I started recording, so just some context there. So you got Christian Kirk traded. We'll make this clear really quick. Nothing changes as far as what you're saving. There's no guaranteed money left. You don't save anything extra trading him versus cutting him. So it's going to be the same situation we've talked about before. And then Devin Duvernay. So his contract this year, he had $1.2 million guaranteed. He had, let's see, this is non-prorated, so $1.25 million, and then the base salary was 2.8. So cutting him, ultimately, the amount of money that you save is about $2.85 million, because you got to pay out this guaranteed salary. So that's something to keep in mind here. But you're going to see that number here, something pretty close to it. And that's going to be what comes of that. Now, why did Devin Duvernay get released? Well, as a return man, I'm not going to say he was bad per se, but when you sign this position, which this previous staff, the coaches and the front office really valued return men quite a bit more than maybe other teams did. We were consistently paying some of the best players decent amounts of money just to be that. Jamal Agnew, for example, getting about $4.5 million a year with the Jaguars. You also, of course, now had Devin Duvernay getting paid by this team. It's a little bit shorter of a deal, but somewhere around the same ballpark. Now, with return men, if you're going to continue to get paid that, you got to perform. Because if you don't, and you're not a part of the offense, you're not doing much else, then what is your value? Right? And that's kind of the issue here. Plus, you also have the conversation about, hey, well, Parker Washington, I'm not going to call him the best return man in the league, but he scored a touchdown last year. He was capable in that position. And so you have to be great, and you have to clearly be better than the other people on your team if you're going to keep your job as a return man in the NFL. For Devin Duvernay, it wasn't the case, and it ultimately was a little bit of a waste of money, just given that you could play Parker Washington in that role, and you get similar results. And last year, what were better results? Whether or not that means that he is better than Devin Duvernay as a return man, sometimes this is luck, right? I mean, Parker's return technically was basically running in a straight line, but ultimately, it makes sense for the Jaguars to make a move here, and that's why they do. Now, Evan Ingram. This just happened. Shocking news to me. Honestly, it's not the shock necessarily as much about, hey, they're going to move on from him. I'm just surprised they're releasing. I don't know if they've been shopping him recently, but I would have guessed that there was some sort of trade market for him. This is a guy who was a Pro Bowl tight end. He had an incredible season at the position in 2023. And last year, he still produced, although he was hurt. That was, of course, the main issue. And so I'm shocked that there was no market for him. And maybe we wait on this one and end up seeing tomorrow, oh, they happened to trade him somewhere. Maybe that happens. Who knows? But Houston Texans are eventually going to run out of 7th-round picks. I'm joking, by the way. But Evan Ingram, he is released from the team. And this is a hard one for fans because this is a player who's consistently been very good for the Jaguars, one of the best at his position, and people have grown attached to him. Totally understand that, and I feel the same way. The issue that we brought up when we recorded the video regarding whether he could maybe be one of those casualties you don't expect this offseason was that, hey, this guy, well, he is a great receiving tight end. What are they going to ask for at the position? Right? What are they going to ask these players to do? And when you go look at the history of what Liam Cohen has asked, blocking is a huge part of their roles. In Evan Engram, I'm not ever going to discredit his effort as a blocker. That is an area that is a strength for him regarding his effort. Now, as far as the results and the impact there, it's not what the guy's built to do. It's not the type of player he is. It doesn't make him a bad player, but he is a different type of tight end. And that is not ultimately a fit, we have learned, with what Liam Cohen was going to try to run here. You also consider, and this was an interesting thing with Evan Ingram's contract with the Jaguars. He was slated to earn almost $14 million a year. But the first 2 years, he was earning $1 million less than that. And those extra $2 million were pushed to 2025, where, yeah, it's supposed to be $13.75 million a year. But now you add this, and then you add up the per game and workout bonus. He was really slated to earn $15.75 million this year. So that's a notable difference, right? Because that's not guaranteed. There's no guaranteed money here. And if that's not guaranteed, then you're paying him $2 million more just for this season than what you had agreed to per year, and you're coming off a year where he was injured. And you have the questions about how do you fit in this type of offense. So that's kind of how you get here to this decision. But once again, I'm surprised that he was released. I would have thought you could have got at third was probably a little rich, but I would think a team would have given up maybe a 4th-round pick to go acquire him. Maybe it would have only been like a 5th or something. I don't know if the Jaguars just didn't really search out a trade. Maybe sometimes that happens. Sometimes we just get surprised. Oh gosh, ignore that at the bottom. I'll just click out because of that. But ultimately, you know, Evan Engram was a player that it made sense for why they moved on from him, as much as it sucks. But yeah, it's a hard one to swallow. But the good news regarding all of this, when we talk about the money that the Jaguars now have available, you have a decent amount. You've gotten off of $16.5 million from Kirk. Go back to this. So $16.5 million from him. Evan Engram, $15.75, so about $32 million combined between them. And then with Devin Duvernay, you're getting off about $2.8 million. So ultimately combined, this is about $35 million that have been freed up in cap space. So that could go towards multiple starters for this team. That could go into a big splash. And ultimately, you know, if these weren't players you were going to plan around for the long term, it is good to get off those contracts and to try to figure out something else that's going to work for you. The other side of the Evan Engram conversation, just want to make sure I don't leave this out before we wrap up here. If you listen close this offseason, there were multiple times where they talked up Brennan Strange. They were saying that this year Brennan Strange was going to be released in a way that we have not seen. Okay? What do you think that meant? Now, that's where I kind of felt that this was coming. Because when you're saying that, you're probably not talking about the guy as a tight end too. And when you look at the way Brennan Strange plays, he's a really good blocker. He's a capable receiving threat. Yeah, I know, like, we were kind of frustrated when he got picked in the 2nd round, and it wasn't really even a name I was aware of in the draft, given I didn't have, like, a huge big board that year. But ultimately, I think he can start. I think he can be an important player in this offense, especially for what they're going to ask for him out of the run game as a blocker and some of the performances he's had as a receiver. I can see him growing into a good starter for the Jaguars, and that's part of this because Brennan Strange is arguably, well, not arguably, but clearly a lot cheaper than Evan Engram was going to be, and that's going to be an advantage for the Jaguars. So that's how we get here. Big day of news. Probably something else happened while I recorded this. If it did, I'll just record another video right after. But that is all I got here. Appreciate you all watching. Want to shout out our channel members, Premier Nasir 904, Nightmare Eco, Gator John Bites, Scrubber Ducky 500, Frangies, and Brian Foster. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to give your thoughts in the comments, what you think about this, maybe some players that we target because of it. Let it all out. I don't mind one bit. But that's all I got. We'll see you in the next one. And finally, go Jags.